Welcome back to What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. Joining us this Sunday is Professor Jessica Brown from the Vermont Law School. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
We are here to talk about the confirmation hearings this week with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I want to first start by talking about the diversity in her background. She mentioned a family member who served time in prison, but also some uncles in law enforcement. What stands out to you there?
What stands out to me is the breadth of experiences that her family reflects, right? In addition to the several members of her family who have been in law enforcement, she's talked extensively about her brother during the hearing, who joined the military after September 11th, 2001. And as we know, she's been a public defender. She's had a family member who's been in prison. So I would hazard to guess that there are very few members of the Supreme Court presently or historically who has had the same amount of diversity of experience with particularly the legal system in our country. But for Judge Jackson to have all of those experiences, both, defending people charged with crimes, having had family members who've been charged with crimes, having had family members who are in law enforcement, having had family members who are in the military, that's a variety that I don't think is very common.
You mentioned her being a public defender. You yourself, a former public defender. How does that affect how laws are interpreted and applied in her work if she's confirmed?
She's spoken extensively this week about her methodology, right? And how she starts from a neutral place. But, I think historically, what we often have seen is, at all levels of the federal judiciary and in many state courts as well, that it's very common for judges to rise through prosecutors' offices and then become judges. It's more rare that people with experience in criminal defense become judges, especially people who have been public defenders and who, meaning that they've represented indigent clients who've been assigned to them. And I think it just, again, offers a different perspective on our laws to have had to come up with defenses to these laws, right? When you are prosecuting a criminal law, you have to prove certain, what we call elements of each offense that are laid out for you in the statute. When you are defending against a charge of a criminal law, sometimes you have to think more broadly than just, is there evidence of possession of drugs? Did this person intend to commit whatever the act is that they are charged with as conduct for the crime? And so, certainly she is very knowledgeable about the laws that she will be being asked, or that she has been asked to interpret as a justice already, right? And I want to mention that there's a lot of focus on her having been a public defender and a lot of focus on her sentencing as a federal judge, but she is very knowledgeable about, she has to be very knowledgeable about all different areas of law. And so, I think that the methodology that she described certainly applies to any law that she's asked to interpret, whether that is a criminal law, whether it's an environmental law, whether it's a tax law. And so, while I do think that her experience as a public defender will inform how she may understand and interpret some criminal laws, I think what's most important is her really clear methodology of how she approaches each case and how she approaches interpreting each law. And she talked extensively this week about reading the text and making sure that she is reading it and understanding it as it was intended by the legislature that drafted the law.
What did you expect from the questioning, and what has surprised you throughout the past few days?
The Supreme Court nomination process has become so politicized, certainly in my lifetime. And so was not particularly surprised that specifically Republican senators took the opportunity to focus in on her work as a federal public defender and her sentencing in criminal cases as a judge. To me, the takeaway from their attempts to question her about those aspects of her work was that there is nothing really with which to discredit Judge Jackson's qualifications to be a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Is it fair to say there were fewer questions about actual legal issues, and maybe from both sides?
Well, I think that's because during this process, someone who has to be impartial when cases do come before her it's not going to be appropriate for her to give opinions on specific legal issues during the nomination process. And I think the senators understand that, and certainly she understands that. And there were even examples given of justices, who have been through the nomination before, most recently Justice Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh, and how they declined to answer certain questions. And again, that's because whether she ends up confirmed as a U.S. Supreme Court justice or continues as a federal appellate court judge, Judge Jackson can't be seen to have expressed publicly specific opinions about specific legal issues when cases on those issues may come before her. So I think that that's why fewer specific legal questions get asked, and there's more of this attempt to dig into more broad philosophy and values.
She would be the fourth woman on the court. Would that make a difference when it comes to some cases? Would it make a difference at all?
Well, she will be the fourth woman on the court. But if we're using labels, which we tend to do, right? The makeup of the court right now with Justice Breyer has been a conservative majority of 6 conservative justices, and the more liberal, there are 3 more liberal judges. And that balance isn't going to change because Judge Jackson will be replacing Justice Breyer. So in terms of, as we label them, the balance of conservative versus liberal justices, that's not going to change. And so the fact that she will be the fourth woman on the court, in terms of affecting decisions by the court, I think will have less significance right now than, because the balance in terms of conservative and liberal justices isn't going to be changed by this appointment.
You mentioned race. The history of this appointment, we heard Senator Cory Booker touch on this a little bit. Did you expect what was mentioned about her history making, if she's confirmed, what it would do to the court and what it would do for women and Black women in general? Did you expect as such to play out?
Because it is such a historic appointment, I certainly expected it to be a topic of, discussion at the hearings. I don't think any of us expected sort of the passionate comments and speech by Senator Booker yesterday. But it's impossible to ignore the significance of the fact that if she's confirmed, she will be the first Black woman on the court. And the first time that someone who has never held a particular role before is appointed to that role or has the opportunity to fill that role, it's significant to everyone. And, you know, I tend to be asked specifically about the significance to Black women and young Black girls, and certainly it is significant to us. It's inspirational to us. You know, it's thrilling. I also think that it's a fantastic model for all children, boys and girls of all races and ethnicities. Again, to see someone in a role that's never been filled by someone like her before. So it signifies that for anyone, that if you've never seen yourself or someone who looks like you or someone who reflects who you are in a particular role, in a particular job, it doesn't mean that you can't do it, right? You can strive to be that first one. So that's the inspiration I take away from her, and that I hope everyone takes away from her.
I wonder how the hearings have played a part in the coursework for your students, and what are the conversations they're having with you?
Thank you for asking me this question. I love talking about my students and the brilliant questions that they ask and comments that they make. And, you know, I teach a class called Constitutional Criminal Procedure, and its focus is entirely on cases that have been decided over the decades by the US Supreme Court, and specifically their impact on our criminal laws. And one thing that we've talked about in my class this semester, you know, the students tend to opine about whether the Supreme Court justices who are making these decisions, like how connected they are to what life is like as a, you know, a citizen in this country, if you're not a Supreme Court justice, right? You know, when they're making decisions about interactions between the police and people that they have stopped in their cars, like the students will say, when's the last, you know, do Supreme Court justices even drive themselves places? When's the last time that they would have had an interaction with the police, if ever, that can inform how they think about what my experience would be if I had an interaction with the police. And so one of the reasons I think it's so exciting to see Judge Jackson being considered for the Supreme Court is because, again, this diversity of experiences that she's had either personally or through family members and close friends and relatives will inform, you know, when she is deciding cases, she has these experiences that can inform, you know, her understanding of what the people in the case before her might have been experiencing. So yeah, so those are the types. So certainly watching this nomination process has been a really interesting experience for my students as we are discussing all of these US Supreme Court cases and thinking about how the justices reach their decisions.
Professor Jessica Brown, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was a lovely discussion. I really appreciate it.